It's really good to be here, particularly as part of this special event for Open Access Week. I'm sorry I didn't make it the rest of the week. It sounds like it's been great, and just like to thank you for organising it. I think it's really important that people do these things. It just takes a few early adopters, a few champions to get this open access known and see that it isn't quite this alien, frightening, scary thing that some people might imagine it is if they don't know quite so much about it. So, thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Jackie and Janet and Guy for hosting me so well. I'm going to try and convince you that open access, as you can see, is important for the humanities, the university and everyone. So, not too big of a task there. I'm aware that some discussions of publishing can appear as something of a specialist interest. I'm trying not to use the word boring. It can be a little bit specialist for those that are interested in these things. However, what I'm going to try and do today is show that publishing actually shapes fundamentally the way in which we work, the way we act, and the way in which we think as academics, scholars and researchers. I'm going to try and show that it's not something that we can just kind of choose to adopt or not adopt. So, my talk is going to consist of two sections. In the second part, I'm going to show you some of the open access projects that I'm involved with. But what I'm going to begin with is I'm going to try and explain why I'm doing this, why I'm so interested in academic publishing. And although I'm involved in a lot of open access projects, and some people would call those projects practical, I actually think of myself or self-identify as a theorist, as Guy was saying. And in that respect, it seems significant to me that most of the major theorists whose thought has tended to provide a framework for the study of contemporary media, which is one of the areas that I work in, they've paid relatively little attention to some of the implications of changes in media technologies and that landscape. The implications those changes have for their own ways of creating and performing and circulating knowledge and research. So in the main, they've been content to operate with norms and conventions and material practices that originated in very different eras, and many of those practices would be familiar to scholars in the second half of the 17th century when the world's first peer-reviewed journal was established, let alone the 21st. So to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm going to turn for a little bit of help, to someone who has paid a lot of attention to the relationship between technology and time, at least, and that's the French philosopher Bernard Stiegler. So there's going to be a few minutes, I better warn people, there's going to be a few minutes of philosophy here. If anybody that doesn't actually like this kind of thing, well, you've all got your Twitter accounts now, so you can kind of go on and amuse yourselves with that. And I'll kind of give you an indication when the philosophy's over and we're getting on to the nice sexy projects. Okay, so, for a little bit of philosophy. So what Stiegler does, he follows Jacques Derrida in arguing that the relation of the human to technology is one of originary technicity. What that means is technology is not added to the human only after the latter's birth, rather the human is born out of the relation to technology. Now, for Derrida, the association of time with the technology of writing means that this originary relation can be understood as a form of writing, or what he calls archi-writing. For Stiegler, however, that understanding universalises archi-writing. It says everything can be understood in terms of writing, basically, and underplays the specificity of different media technologies and the relation to time. So for him, because the human is born out of a relation to technology, because time can only be accessed and experienced as a result of its prior inscription in concrete technical forms, the nature of consciousness changes over time as media technologies themselves change. So Stiegler stresses we have to distinguish between the reproducibility of the letter, which is first handwritten and then printed, analogue reproducibility, particularly photographic and cinematographic, and then digital reproducibility. So you've got these three types of reproducibility that for Stiegler have constituted and overdetermined the great epochs of memory in the West. producing areas in which subjects have different awareness of time. Which is why I'm emphasising that the media technologies that we use as scholars and researchers are important, not just for the humanities, but for everyone. Those technologies are helping to shape our subjectivities and the way that we act and we think. Now, as far as the present epoch is concerned, Stiegler portrays the contemporary culture industries as subordinating the subject's consciousness to pre-programmed, standardised, controllable patterns of what he calls their temporal objects, basically their output. And the way to respond to this industrialisation of memory, as he terms it, it's not by trying to somehow escape or elude those media technologies, or become otherwise autonomous from them. That's because originary technicity means that there's no human without technology. So you can't escape from them. We're kind of born in this relation to technology. But neither can we resolve the problem by replacing the industrial mass media with the apparently more personal and participatory and democratic model of communication that's associated with social media. So we can see that from the way that Amazon, Facebook and Google are merely superseding the old culture industries when it comes to subordinating consciousness and attention to pre-programmed patterns of information conceived as merchandise. Apparently Facebook can tell when you're going to get divorced now because your spending patterns changed 2 years earlier. I don't know what you're buying. Men, it's probably cars or something, sports cars or leather jackets. But anyway, and I'm just, wow. Make sure I didn't come in a leather jacket. Okay. What Stiegler's emphasising instead, he presents these technologies as Foucauldian dispositives, or what Plato described as pharmaca, which is both poisons and cures. So you're not trying to escape these technologies, they're good and bad, putting it simply. So for Stiegler, it's much more a matter of exploring how some of the tendencies of which our current economy of the pharmacon is composed, and how these technologies can be deployed, and how we can give them new and different inflections. That's partly what we're doing with open access. We're taking the technologies and giving them new and different inflections. The question that's raised for me by this event today, though, concerns the medium that Stiegler himself most frequently deploys to analyse and critique the specific changes in media technology that are helping to shape subjectivity in the era of digital reproducibility. And this comes back to some of the questions Chris was talking about in the kind of response, his colleagues' response. And to what extent is it appropriate for Stiegler to do so as if he himself was still living in the epoch of writing and the printed codex, book and journal article? Is Stiegler, like Derrida in his account, not privileging writing and the associated forms of presentation and debate and critical intervention as means of understanding the specificity of different media technologies? I'll give you some examples. The concept of originary technicity should undermine any conception, any romantic conception of the self as somehow separate from those objects that provide it with a means of expression. Yet from his first book in 1994, Techniques and Time, right through to 2011's Decadence of Industrial Democracies and beyond, Stiegler continues to act as if he subscribes to the notion of the author as individual creative genius. It's associated with that tradition of European cultural romanticism. He persists in publishing books devoted to the building of long-form arguments that are intended to be decisive, comprehensive, monumental, definitive, and above all, his. Now, of course, as I'm sure you're probably already thinking, it's not just Stiegler that acts like that. Much the same could be said of Virilio and Roncière and Zizek and Meillassoux, and in fact most thinkers of contemporary society, culture and media today, including, of course, many of us. How can it not be when academics in the humanities often need at least one monograph published with a reputable print press to secure that all-important first appointment, promotion, tenure if you're in the US. Next, my question is that just as in Technics and Time, Stiegler sees Heidegger as having forgotten Epimetheus and Western philosophy as having forgotten techniques, is there something that Stiegler himself has forgotten? Has he forgotten to pay enough attention to the fact that the publishing of articles and monographs and multi-volume series of books that are submitted to learned journals and university presses does not take place outside and apart from the domain of the culture industries, but is itself heavily implicated in the control and homogenisation of our thought, memory, consciousness and behaviour through its media technologies. So in short, has Stiegler forgot to pay sufficient attention to the cultivation of his own self? Specifically the way his subjectivity as a philosopher and academic is born out of relation to techniques and time, including an academic publishing industry that is historically contingent and changing and dynamic. So my question is this: if, Stiegler says, in the era of digital reproducibility, subjects are created with a different form of the awareness of time to that of the printed letter, do we not need to explore critically new ways of being philosophers and academics as well? Now, for me, this includes ways of being philosophers and academics that depart from the distracted and depressed neoliberal model of the self-disciplining, entrepreneurial academic that many sees currently being imposed on us with the assistance of things like Facebook, networked digital technologies, and corporate social media in particular. But it also includes ways of being that are different from the traditional, romantic, humanist model, with its basis in writing and publishing print-on-paper codex books and journal articles. We could ask the question, for in the one ways, aren't both of these models involved in the subordination of our agency and consciousness to the calculable, controllable, pre-programmed, standardised patterns of creation and accreditation and publication and circulation of the contemporary culture industries? And they come along with a whole set of cliched, ready-made ideas of what it is to be an author, what originality is, what a book is, what fixity is, what copyright is. So it's this question that I'm exploring in a whole series of open access projects. What would open access research and scholarship that's thought and performed in this way look like? Scholarship that's performed, say, with a blog or a wiki or a smartphone or a tablet, as much as with a pen or book, and which didn't look quite so much like that. So these projects include a series of IP TV programs, Internet Protocol TV. Yeah. I'll go back to the they include IP TV programs, an Open Humanities notebook, and a piece on internet piracy that only exists to the extent it's actually part of a pirate network and that it is stolen and pirated. And some of these projects that I'm going to detail for you now, beginning with the Open Access Press that was mentioned earlier, Open Humanities Press. So anyone that's on Twitter, this is the time to kind of resurface and come back and join us as we go through the project. So, Open Humanities Press. This is something that I started with Siggy Jotkent, David Otina and Paul Ashton in 2008, working in collaboration with an international network of scholars and librarians and publishers, very much in response to the perceived crisis in scholarly publishing. This crisis is where traditional academic presses have cut back on the number of research-led titles they bring out that focus much more on introductions and textbooks and reference works. And libraries are finding it difficult to afford the research that is published, both books and journals. So in the first instance, OHP consisted of a collective of already existing open access online only journals. One of the ideas behind OHP was to bring these journals together, we currently have 14, under a single organisational umbrella and raise their profile and level of prestige in the eyes of academics and administrators by way of a meta-refereeing process, kind of addressing that anxiety around review. So to this end, we have an editorial board that includes people like Alan Badiou and Bruno Latour and Beatrice Spivak, and an editorial oversight group that consists of a rotating body of 13 scholars that's drawn from this editorial board. And we use them to assess our titles according to a whole set of policies relating to publication standards and technical standards and general intellectual fit with OHP's mission. So the plan when we first started was to spend the first few years building a reputation with OHP, with the journals, before proceeding to tackle the more difficult problem of publishing book-length material open access. Okay. Why do I say it's difficult? Well, it's difficult because one of the main models of funding open access in the sciences, which is author-side fees, which, as we've heard, is what's been advocated in both the Finch report and by David Willits, that model's not easily transferable, either to book publishing or to the humanities. Authors in the humanities are not used to paying to have their work published, even if it is just a matter of covering the cost of its production and processing and calling these processing fees. They tend to associate doing so with vanity publishing. Humanities authors are also less likely to obtain the research grants that are needed to cover the cost of publishing author pays. As we know, most humanities research is funded out of the salaries that's paid to academics. So there's not necessarily a project grant out of which such fees can be taken. That the humanities receive only a fraction of the amount of government funding that science, technology, engineering and maths, STEM, does, only compounds the problem. As does the fact that the high rejection rates in the humanities, as compared to STEM, means any grants would have to be significantly larger to cover the cost of the greater amount of time and labour involved. And all that's just to publish journal articles. Publishing books, author pays, will be more expensive still. So things have developed much faster than we thought they would. As soon as we launched, a lot of people got in touch asking us, when we were going to publish books open access. It's all very well journals, we can kind of do this. Books is the real problem because of the gold standard in the humanities. So in 2009 we established a monograph project, which is run in collaboration with M Publishing, which is a scholarly publishing unit of University of Michigan Library. And the idea of that is to move forward both open access publishing in the humanities and the open access publishing of monographs. And the way the monograph project works is like this. Scholars come together around area of interest through a book series, and they perform the editorial oversight, the manuscript selection, development, and arrange the peer review. The resulting books are then run through the suite of services that are provided by M Publishing at the University of Michigan, and they're made freely available full text open access online as HTML, and nearly all of them PDF. We're also offering print on demand and hopefully eventually EPUB. M Publishing at Michigan is subsidising the production and distribution costs. They do the hosting, the cataloguing, making the print books available for sale through online distributors. And that goes along with their mission, which is to provide an array of sustainable publishing solutions to the scholarly community. So it's this partnership with M Publishing that's enabled us to afford to publish open access books without author pays or publishing fees or external funding for that matter, and yet to maintain high production standards in the process. Now, the thing is that all the books that I've shown you so far are fairly recognisable as books in the print on paper sense. The only real difference that you'd experience if you were to read them is that they're online, available for free, open access. However, in line with the first half of my talk today, We also wanted to have a series that was experimenting with some of the more imaginative forms that publishing digital media make possible. And that's where the Living Books About Life project comes in. This is funded by JISC and edited by myself, Claire Burchill, who's now at King's, and Joanna Zielinska of Goldsmiths University of London. And Living Books About Life is a series of open access books on life. Life understood there as in both philosophical and biological terms. The idea was to provide something of a bridge between the humanities and the sciences. So what we've got in the series, there's currently 23 books that have been created by a globally distributed network of writers and editors. And so what happens is these collaboratively produced books repackage existing open access science-related content from repositories such as archive.org, Public Library of Science, PubMed Central and so on. They do that by clustering it around selected topics to form a series of coherent single-themed volumes. So, air, bioethics, cosmetic surgery, veterinary science and so on. So by initially we managed to create 21 such books in just 7 months. We see the series as a model for publishing in a low-cost manner many more such books in the future. We've added at least another 2 this year already. And just 4 days after we launched, the site already had 3,500 visitors with over 11,000 page views, which you compare to how many people see ordinary books. That's quite a lot. It's not as many as some websites get, but in terms of readership, that's not too bad. Now, we want to experiment with publishing books in this way for a number of reasons. Many of us have been advocating research to be made open access for a while now. However, what we want to do with this project is do a little more than just lobby for open access. That's really important, but we want to do a bit more. So what we decided was to just take 20 or so humanities scholars who weren't necessarily already familiar with open access, and get them actively engaged in some of the processes involved in publishing in this fashion. What we wanted was for them to start making more use of the research that's already available open access in journals and repositories. We also wanted to make them more aware of the implications of not making their research available in that fashion. So we started by asking the editors to create their books by repackaging and representing existing open access science-related research content. This could be previously published material from peer-reviewed open access journals or self-archiving repositories such as PubMed Central and JISC content. The main stipulation we gave them was that each book had to contain a minimum of 10 such open access science-related articles. And we did that to ensure that the majority of each book is made up of open access content that's already being peer reviewed and is available under appropriate Creative Commons licenses. However, once they had these 10 articles, this content could then be supplemented with additional material, so peer reviewed book chapters, but also podcasts, visualizations, interactive maps and so on. If you look through, people use a variety of different things. In addition, each editor was then asked to write an original opening essay, kind of link their volumes of content together and providing a bridge between the humanities and the sciences. Open Humanities Press published the initial version of each living book online, open access, on an open source Wikimedia platform, and that allows users to join in the process of composing and editing, remixing and reusing these books. So all the books in the series, including the introductory essays, are themselves available to be shared and reused on an open basis. But one of the most important aspects of this project for us is the impact it's had on the researchers taking part. To start with, there was a generally low level of knowledge among most of our chosen humanities-based editors regarding publishing open access and the restrictions that are placed on academic publications by publishers' licensing and copyright agreements. It quickly became clear that most academics still require guidance on those issues, and these were even people who were working in digital media. So, for example, it took some of our editors quite some time to realise that while they may be able to openly access a given article from their computer at work, because their institutions have taken out a subscription to a particular journal, or JSTOR, or Project Muse, or whatever, other people whose institutions have not taken out such a subscription, or who are not affiliated to an institution, may not be able to access that article online at all. Basically, the idea was, if I can see it on the internet, everyone can. Also, a big need, we spent a lot of time clarifying the difference between open access articles that are made available under Creative Commons licenses, that allow others to copy and reuse and distribute and display them publicly and use them to make and distribute derivative works, and articles with proprietary licenses that have been made available open access in repositories such as PubMed, but which are not available for reuse. However, by working through some of these issues and showing them that if work is not made available in this way, bring it home to them, that people can't access or read or cite it or use it. We kind of found many of these authors becoming really, they didn't really realise what the implications were of not making their work open access. They didn't realise people couldn't find it. And if they did, they couldn't really do much with it. But as well as all that, as if that's not enough, the project, like the sister series, Liquid Books, which we'll say a bit more about in a moment, also allows us to challenge the material and conceptual limitations of the traditional codex book. Goes back to what I was saying earlier. By including more than just journal articles and book chapters. We've been able to include whole books in our living books. And not just that, but short extracts from books, as well as pages, snippets, references, quotations, annotations, links, tags. We've got audio-visual material from YouTube and Vimeo. So publishing in this way allows us to explore some of the possibilities of general movement towards publishing academic work online. What with open access and Google Books and Scribed and e-book readers such as Amazon's Kindle and their multi-use rivals, including Apple's iPad. One of the main motivations behind this project, however, was to experiment with publishing a book that wasn't just open access, but was open editing and libre content too. So as I say, these books are not just freely available worldwide for anyone to read. These living books about life are themselves living in the sense they're open on a read-write basis for users to help compose and edit, annotate, translate and remix them. This means that as well as repackaging the available open access science material on life into a series of books, the project's also engaged in rethinking the book itself as a living, collaborative endeavour in the age of open access and open science, open data and open education, as well as rethinking some of the other ideas I mentioned earlier, including authorship, originality, fixity and so on. So anyone can get involved in creating books for the series, for example, or in adopting existing books for use in teaching, say as an alternative form of course pack or course reader, one where the content and form of the book can be negotiated, updated and altered by students themselves under the guidance of a tutor. In teaching situations, these living books have become student-centred, customisable learning tools which actively involve students in curriculum design. So perhaps the best example I can give of this is the course reader that Joanna Zielinska developed for our sister series, Liquid Books. This was used for a 10-week graduate theory course, Technology and Cultural Form, Debates, Models, Dialogues, that was taught in a workshop format at Goldsmiths College, University of London, to 25 students. And the course discusses the relationship between various media and technological forms, their uses, and the culture in which they operate. So in this context, this liquid reader provides a practical case study of a media form that students can both think about and actively construct. So a basic skeletal course reader was first devised online using the Wiki platform It included the key course content and was subsequently open to customization by students. And throughout the course, students were involved in adding and editing the reader's content. They're also encouraged to experiment with ideas of the reader or book through activities such as collaboratively writing a wiki-style essay, putting together an online gallery of their photographic works as part of this reader. So the idea behind this project was to provide an open access study tool which facilitates the sharing of knowledge and pedagogic practice. Okay, I'm just going to take a minute and I'm going to end by showing you how I talked about how this is important for the university. Show how we're using some of these living books as part of a broader open media strategy that we've developed at Coventry, the media department, to address some of the challenges that we're facing in universities in the 21st century. So in the last few years we've launched 4 what we're calling open media courses, all of which are freely available online. What that means is the classes on these courses, not just the readers, but the actual classes themselves, are open to anyone, anywhere, to participate in, add to discussions, and kind of even rip and remix and mash them up if you want. So this applies to the schedule, the lectures, the lesson contents, exercises and assignments, recommended reading, online talks and interviews with visiting speakers, as well as a number of practical how-to videos, all available under a CC licence. So, photography and narrative, that's the picture of our first years. They all get a laptop these days, yeah, and they all sit in darkened rooms. So, photography and narrative and picture in body are the 2 longest standing of these open courses. They date back from 2009. And they enable academics, researchers, students, practitioners from both inside and outside the university to collaboratively produce and curate and engage with a wide range of media and educational resources, in the case of these courses relating to photography. So after they featured in Wired magazine, where they were described, as you can see down there, shaking up education, approximately 1,000 people signed up to take these open classes. We had to hire someone to deal with the emails. And we had 20,000 people attending one of these classes in August 2011 alone. So, I'll give you some figures. Since September 2011, we've had 29,000 people from 1,632 cities in 107 countries pass through some of these classes. Okay, I'm a little bit over time, so I'm just going to end there. Thank you very much.